determine what you see and hear. We are the people behind the curtain. We are the invisible ones. Prepare for a glimpse into a world many are unaware of and few have seen. Your journey begins now.
Hello, and welcome to the Invisible Ones podcast, the only podcast that peels back the curtain of the live events industry, allowing you to look under the hood and see the engine that drives this multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry. On today's episode, Angel and I will be discussing the new to the industry, thanks COVID, phenomenon called virtual events, which I would posit have actually been around for many years, and we're all familiar with them. In fact, we have an opportunity to see something like it in practice every day. They're called broadcast TV shows, talk shows, news programs, but with a slight twist in the corporate events market mainly. So imagine, if you will, that what used to be your live event is now like a pay-per-view or subscription-only TV show, talk show, your very own talk show. You're the host. You get to pick the guests. You pick the band. You pick the audience. You're the star. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, folks. There's already a time-tested template we can use to ensure that your next event is a success. And we'll get into all that in just a moment. But first, Angel is going to tell you about one of our sponsors, Red Rock Ops. Angel?
Hey, Tommy. Red Rock Ops is one of our sponsors this week. And just want to let you know about Red Rock Ops. They're an entertainment industry consulting company that specializes in color calibration, sales, consulting, and training. And they also specialize in the live overlays. And what is a live overlay? Ask me what's a live overlay, Tom.
What is a live overlay, Angel?
Well, in the broadcast industry, you call them lower thirds, but that is a very, very simple way of putting what a lower third is these days. The lower thirds or the live overlays that you can do with Singular Live, which is one of the things that Red Rocks is a certified partner for, is a way to take your webcast or your broadcast to the next level, data-driven, Google Sheet-driven, and we can explain all that later, but Red Rock Ops this week is our sponsor, and if you need to know anything more about Red Rock Ops, please go to redrockops.com, and all the information that you need to contact them is there. They're Las Vegas-based, but they work around the country, just like all of us, and they used to work around the world, but until COVID is done.
We all used to work
around the world. But
now we work around our houses.
Exactly, but there you go, the Red Rock Ops. Big shout out to Red Rock Ops for sponsoring our podcast today.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's redrockops.com. Check them out on the web, folks. That's awesome. That's and we'll hear a little bit more about Singular and their work that Red Rock Ops works with in the later on. And folks, when you go to redrockops.com, don't forget to tell them who sent you there. Yep. The invisible ones. So, virtual events. Now, we have several items to talk about today under that banner. And one of the top ones, I think, which I kind of alluded to at the beginning, was this mindset shift as technicians. But I think it's a mindset shift for our clients, right? For producers, and most importantly, for attendees. We are used to, and in fact, I would say, we have spent the last 30 years training business executives and companies how to do a corporate event. Right. That, and it took us a while to get them to even understand that it's not a business meeting. Right. You're doing a show. You are doing a show. You have a stage. We are lighting it. You have a big speakers. You're wearing a microphone. Oftentimes, there are these massive screens that are showing video content, graphics, what have you. And nowadays, there's usually a big LED wall behind you. Right. That is doing a background of some sort, whether it be your logo, moving logo, graphics, whatever. And you've got anywhere from a few hundred to tens of thousands of people that are sitting out in the audience that are watching this happen. Right. You're doing a show. Yep. And I know that at least in the last, I'd say 5 years, there's been another shift that I've noticed. I don't know if you have, that we finally understand, okay, we get the fact that we're doing a show, but we don't want it to feel like a show. Right. We want it to we need to remember it's a business meeting. We're trying to get this business across. And I think that's absolutely important. In fact, I did a show years ago in what will remain as an undisclosed location because of NDA. But we had 139 C-level executives, all from the same overall umbrella enterprise that had all these corporations underneath it. And they kept telling us they don't want it to be like a regular show. They want it to feel unshow-like.
Right.
But the purpose behind it was they really wanted it to be, this was from, the top executive, the CEO, CMO of the main umbrella corp over all these other companies. They wanted it to be, let's get together, get all of our executives together, let's roll up our sleeves and get to work on how we can be better, do better, and help our companies that are all under the same banner work better together.
Right.
And it was a working session, and they really wanted to do it. And I think that, we ended up doing a good job and gave them what they asked for. And it was crazy because I had to keep reminding the techs not to go into autopilot and, that, hey, they want this to be different, et cetera. And now we're seeing a big shift to this virtual event world.
Right.
And I think one of the things I've seen, and you can let me know if you've seen the same thing, of trying to fit this round peg of live events that we've been doing for 30 plus years or so into this square peg of virtual events.
Right.
And the differences. In our last episode, we talked about why live events need to come back. They're very, very important. But at the same time, now we're dealing with these virtual events.
Right.
And so I want to talk a little bit about that and the fact that we do have this template that we can, what's the old adage? Amateurs copy, professionals steal. So we have this template that we can steal from called broadcast TV talk show, broadcast TV news shows, et cetera. And to stop thinking of it as a virtual event, because there's an expectation that goes with that event word that you're not going to get with a virtual event.
Exactly.
Because you don't have your audience. You are not on a stage with all these people around you, and social distancing, et cetera, et cetera.
And I have something to add to that.
Yeah.
The webcast to me, and we're all very visual people. So in my mind, I have this, to me, the virtual event or the webcast is that it's, picture cutscene,
Yeah, right.
Backstage there's somebody on the sidelines, backstage where we usually hang out. And it's this kid, and it's like, he's got this thing. He's like, hey, I can do webcasts. And everybody's like, kid, forget about it. You'll never be number one. You'll never be number one. You'll never be, broadcasters are just going to be that, or, sitcoms or TV.
Right.
And all of a sudden this kid's just sitting on the sideline, and all of a sudden something happens on stage, COVID-19. And all of a sudden a producer grabs this kid by the collar and goes, you're up on the stage. And now this kid's sitting there going, well, I'm Webcast.
Yeah.
And listen to what I have to say, right? And everybody's like, Webcast is the guy. He's the guy. We're doing Webcast now.
He's the one with the answers. He's going to tell us where we're going.
So to me,
he has the map.
In a very visual way, that's how I see that Webcast get just thrown out there. But then everybody starts saying, well, Webcast is not that professional. Look at him. He doesn't know, he doesn't wear the right clothes, or she doesn't, he or she doesn't wear the right clothes, or, he doesn't know how to do intros, or Webcast doesn't know how to do this. He doesn't know how to communicate, and go, but they just pulled him out. And Webcast, he hasn't been in the business 20 years like the broadcaster has been.
Right.
He's just been thrown out. And so kind of to focus on that. That to me is what Webcast is. It's a new kid just got thrown in the middle of it, and everybody's expecting them to be the 20-year-old, or the 20-year veteran of this industry. And now it's like, well, let's teach Webcast how to do different things.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but that's, getting back to what we're saying, and that's what Webcast to me has become.
No, and I
they're
think
the main performer now in the middle of the stage.
Absolutely. I think that's a great perspective on that, because I would add to that it's been in the last, I want to say 5 to 7 years that 99% of the shows that we do are now streamed live. Right. Whereas 10 years ago, maybe it was a few here and there.
Right. It was a special thing. This is going to be,
we're going to put this on the web.
Exactly. I can remember back as far as, and I'm going to update myself here, Farm Aid 98.
Oh yeah.
Right. They actually webcast that thing. And it was like, I think maybe 10 people logged in.
On their 24.4K
right.
or whatever it was.
Yeah. It was probably a 240 by 160 window or something crazy small like that. But
and it was extremely pixelated,
right.
and it was like, 10 frames a second or something. And and the audio sounded like it was coming through your telephone.
That's right.
And but it was awesome. It was this whole new technology, and we're going to do this. It's going to be amazing. But I do think that kind of speaks to that whole round peg, peg, square hole, because then they're taking what they understand of a live stream or a webcast, and it's like, okay, that's what we're doing now. It's like, no, that's not what we're doing now.
Sure.
We're doing something totally different.
Exactly.
And we're going to talk specifically about that aspect of it. But I also want to kind of just touch on the other subjects we're going to hit today, which is, and speaking of that, new technologies that are were available, that we're either repurposing or, using in a slightly different way, or just using because this is the best way to do this. But also some new technologies that may have come out just even since COVID hit, the pandemic hit, that that we can tap into. And then we're going to talk about some of the best practices that we've seen that some companies are starting to do in terms of making this shift over to virtual events. And then what are the changes in the roles that we as technicians are dealing with? Because show site used to be in the back of a ballroom behind the curtain, as we jokingly say, hey, what show are you doing? I don't know, same ballroom, different carpet.
Right.
Same hotel, different carpet, whatever. But, or convention centers, et cetera.
Well, so much so like Tex would actually post pictures of
the carpet
and be like, where am I at? And then, 20 people would chime in and be like, you're right, you're wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Cause there is some ballroom carpet out there that is very distinct and exactly what hotel that person is in. But how are those roles changing? Because obviously if you're moving into more of a mindset of, we're not doing a live event, we're not even doing a webcast, we're doing a TV show.
Right.
Well, these are industry veterans who've been doing this for 20, 30 years, and they haven't been doing broadcast TV. There are industry veterans that are doing, that have been doing broadcast TV. It is a different world. And we do sometimes cross over when we do like a live broadcast, which I've worked on several live TV broadcasts, and you've got, your team, your team of stagehands, et cetera, that are setting everything up, and your team of techs that are working the show, and they're doing their show for the live audience. And then you have the guys in the truck that are doing the TV part of it. And the two sort of separate worlds that occasionally kind of crisscross into each other. But now it's not that we're going into their world in the sense of we're not going to try and take over the broadcast TV world, but we can use some of the tools and practices, et cetera, that they have. And so how does that change our roles as technicians? What new things do we need to learn? And then a biggie also would be for the account people out there, for the producers, et cetera. How do you sell this to your clients? Because
there's been questions that I've gotten over and over and over. How do you sell this?
How do you sell this?
How do you package it?
Because the companies, the corporations that do these events, they know how important they are. Oftentimes there's a big ROI for their bottom line every year on how many events they go to, especially when you get into the trade show side of things. Right. But even the meetings that we do, the big general sessions, and the guys who do breakout rooms and stuff like that. How do you sell that to somebody when you're no longer going to rent out a hotel for a week or so, bring all these people in, have, your big ballroom general session here, and then all these separate meeting rooms around the hotel, and this event over in this part of the hotel, and, setting up your breakfast and your catering, et cetera, or even the ones that we do out in big tents, out in the middle of a parking lot somewhere, or up in the mountains at a retreat. I mean, we do events, in every conceivable type of structure that you can imagine. I mean, even as crazy as this sounds, but even in like a little shack in the woods.
Sure.
Because that's important to that particular event, and that's getting it's helping. It's all part of the messaging. Yep. So which then brings me to the last thing we'll talk about, which I consider to be the holy grail, which is audience engagement. They're there, and we talked about this in the last episode at live events. You're a captured audience. You're there. There's so much that happens on a live event that that doesn't happen in a virtual event. But because we're in this virtual event world now, how do we keep our audience engaged? How do we keep the eyes on the screen? Well, again, we look to our brothers and sisters over in the broadcast TV industry and go, all right, how are you keeping people's eyes on the screen?
Right.
When they've got a clicker in their hand, it's a little different than sitting in front of a laptop with a mouse and going, yeah, I'm going to go check this webpage out, or, oh, I'm going to pull my phone out, but it's the same idea as the remote. If you don't keep them engaged, they can just either tune out, or they can click away, or hit pause and go, I'll come back and watch that later, and not. So looking into what are those ways that we can do that. So now, and you've done several of these events over the past few months. So what's your experience been? I mean, what are you seeing that's working? What's not? What are if you had this kind of power, what are 3 things that you would change for your next one from what you've seen in terms of how people are doing things?
The 3 things that I would change. The first one would be we have to get people more engaged in the fact of knowing that this is not going to be forever. And the reason we say this is because we want live events to come back, right? I mean,
like we said in the previous podcast, live events need to come. It's not even about the fact that we want them to come back. I mean, obviously we want them to come back. It's our livelihood. But really, for the health of our economy for the health of people in general, and that's kind of what we talked about, was, we need that human connection. Live events have to come back.
Yep. So the second, so the first thing I would change is the fact of letting people know that this is not going to last. This is not going to be the thing forever, but it's become a set, basically a tool in your tool belt, in your tool chest, whatever you want to call it. So now we've gotten, I think it's looking at it as a derogatory thing is, oh, we're doing hybrid events, which I've heard that a couple of times. It's like, oh, we're going to do this as a hybrid event. Well, we should look at that as a positive thing. That's the first. So the first thing I would change is, or add to, is the fact that we're adding this brand new cool thing that now we can either engage in regional markets or anything else. And it's, a little bit of a low cost so we can fill in a lower market, but it's not changing the whole thing. This is not going to be the full thing. Right. The second thing I would change is the fact that we need to treat it just like you said, a broadcast event, man. The broadcast event always has the graphics and the show and the actors and all the cool graphics and the XR, mixed reality, which is a cool thing that we haven't thought about. A lot of people haven't thought about. There's some people who are starting to do it, and I've been engaged in some of that stuff, and we'll talk about that recently. But it's not just a Zoom meeting now,
right?
That just has a guy like we're doing right now and a camera, and you switch to a flat 2D. That's the easiest way to lose your audience, in my opinion. And like you said, take advantage of the fact that you have this camera, and what has been done in that 16:9 space? Back when it started, 4:3. Now it's 16:9. Take advantage of that and make it go further. So that's another thing I would change is stop making your broadcast so boring. Because people will tune out. If you think about it, it's like video on demand, right? When you go to that new Netflix show that you're like, you know what? Let me check out that show that my friend's been telling me about. Right. And you watch, I'll literally watch the first 3 minutes. I'm going to go, that's not me. And you tune it off.
Yep.
That's what they're doing to your meeting.
Yeah.
Right. And the last thing I would say, the third one in there is, you got to be not just engaging, but just make sure to know that people are wanting this. They want to engage from home, and they also want to be able to participate in the sense, not in a Zoom style meeting, right? Which to me that's a little too. And we'll break down the 4 different things that we've been talking about. They want to engage, but they just don't want to sit there and just be bored, because that's, on top of things, make sure the content is engaging. Like you said, keep them going, keep them. And we'll talk about the psychology of all that. But those are the 3 things, basically, that are going in there.
To what you're saying there from the attendees, I would agree. I think that, your attendees, they want to be engaged. They want this to be a success. And and what we've learned over the last several months is, obviously now you hear all the complaints about the Zoom meetings,
Right.
and there's memes out there, and we even got the mouse pad from one of our clients with Zoom meeting bingo on it, of all the things that you hear on a Zoom call.
Right.
You're still muted, and all that
Right.
kind of stuff. They want to be engaged, and Zoom has been amazing.
Sure.
It's been a great tool, but there's so much more
Absolutely.
that can be done. And I think speaking to that of the attendees, they want to be engaged in this. They want to be able to interact. They don't want to, we're saying that, you need to treat it more like a TV show.
Right.
But your audience is not the one that wants to just sit back on the couch and watch and just absorb. They want to be involved.
Right.
And so, looking at how do we do that? And I would say, from my experience, and I just did a virtual event last week, and what I saw, and this was the part for me, was the mindset shift kind of clicked in for me, because
Right.
I actually have experience doing TV shows back when I was in LA, working on TV shows. And, that, as I talk about it with a friend of mine, was you're looking at this, and you're looking at and when we do a live event, we have to look at how the stage looks and everything that's around it. It's all got to be great because everybody can see everything. And also we need to focus on what does the camera see and making sure that works, et cetera. The beauty of TV is what the camera doesn't see doesn't matter.
Right. I could now be wearing pants right now. I'm just kidding.
It can be whatever you want.
Right.
Because no one's ever going to see that. So you can really focus in on what is inside, as I put it, what's inside the box.
Right.
That 16:9 window, what are you putting in there? That's the most important. All the stuff around the peripheral, nobody cares. It doesn't matter.
To me, if you don't mind, one of the things have you ever been to Rockefeller Center, maybe walk through the SNL studio?
Not SNL, no, but I've been to Rock.
If you've ever been there, it is one of the tiniest studios ever.
Oh yeah, it's
right.
It's insane.
And you say to yourself, man, SNL, this, whether you like it or not anymore, you thought it was funny back in the day, you don't think it's funny. The stuff that's come out of there is memorable, right? And that they've been able to do that in such a small space. It's because you're playing to that camera. The sets change everything else, but you're playing to those cameras, right?
Yeah.
When you do a convention that you have a 200-foot wide screen, you could fit probably 6 SNL, studios
just on your stage,
right? Just on your stage and the LED wall.
Yeah.
You're right. Every bit of that has to be perfect to where in the SNL stage, you're really curating the props and making sure that things are, being seen or not. In some cases, like you said, like the reason I said not wearing pants or whatever on the Weekend Update stuff, like. Some of the actors have actually said, I was just wearing shorts on that and just wearing the top,
Yeah.
Because you only have to play that camera. On real stage, man, you have to make sure that CEO is dressed up completely.
Oh, yeah.
He or she, or like the hair is fine, the mics are on right. You're going to be looking at people from different sides of the stage. So it's a big task of what we do versus what goes on in broadcast. But we have to start thinking about that small screen as well now. So that's a great thing.
As an example of that, I am actually wearing shorts right now. I'm wearing a nice collared shirt, but I'm going to stand up here.
Look at that. See, he's wearing shorts.
There's a little knee for you.
I'm wearing jeans. I'm wearing jeans. Okay. So just a shirt, but I'm wearing jeans, but yeah, in real life, you have to actually have a real suit,
right?
Or, or if you're playing to some other, a costume or something like that has to be perfect.
And you brought up about SNL and how small it was and everything, but they had a live studio audience there.
They did.
Right.
Yep,
and I actually, something that happened to me years ago, I was doing a show in Vegas with a client that I had just done a show with for a different one of their clients, but the producer was the same. And I was the lighting designer on both those shows. We had just done a show in Dallas. Now we're doing the one in Vegas. And he had this pet peeve about where we put the truss and the lights and how close it is to the stage and the steep angle of the lights and everything. And he actually he asked me to send him a side sectional and point out the exact incidence of angle from the light in the truss to a person standing on the stage,
right.
which was like, almost 60 something degrees. And we're out in Vegas and I'm focusing the lights and he comes, he's like, I don't know why you guys always put the truss so close. And, you've got these lights, they're right here. And I said, yes, but okay, the light that's right up in front of me right here is actually not the light that's lighting me. I'm lighting it from these points and then filling in with a little bit here. And I said, he said, but in TV we would have we'd have lights down here. And I said, and they put it at like a 30-degree angle, and you'd have. And I said, yes. And if this were a TV show, I would have a bunch of 5K Bambinos on trombones down from the truss that would be right about here.
Yep.
Pointing at the stage like this. I said, the difference is when you do TV, your live studio audience are props.
Exactly.
In fact, you light them. The show is not for them. The show is all about what goes into the box, into the TV, into the camera. Corporate events, a live corporate event, we have to play to the live audience and the TV audience at the same time. And that's where, there's a little bit of a disconnect in terms of like, well, in TV we do it this way. And they're like, yeah, but we're actually doing a combo meal deal, and both of them have to be excellent.
Right.
So you're always compromising a little bit. Well, now with the virtual events, with the studio that we were at the other day, they've got lights that are, right above the camera shining onto the stage and are all around. And you don't ever see them because there's no audience, and we don't show that shot.
Well, in the live events also, we're worried about not putting a camera guy up front. You put him in a pedestal back and you get the long lens. Yeah. On TV, the pedestal's in front of the audience, and hey, if you don't get to see it,
sorry,
you're just part of the audience, right? Yeah. So those two, considerations, same thing. Sight lines are big things for us in live, not so much. And
we do light our audiences occasionally.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we light it because we're gonna shoot out there, and sometimes we just light it as house lighting. But that to me is one of the advantages of the TV world is, you can do so much more in a smaller space because you're not so concerned about how what the big picture is in terms of what the room looks like and all this stuff. There's so much more that you can do. So that's an advantage that we have. But I do think that, as I was getting into that, about the technicians that I've dealt with, and also the clients and the producers, like you said about the web stream, they're thinking about this in terms of, we're still doing our live event, but now we're just streaming it. Right. And it's like, I think personally, that's the wrong way to approach it. That's the wrong way to think about it. But if you consider and think about the fact that you are doing a TV show, and for some of the techs, that's going to be a shift in how they do things. Right. They're going to have to learn some new skills, which, by the way, is something we're going to talk about on our next episode. We're going to get into how we learn. So that people can start figuring out some of this stuff, best way to do things. But there's a thought process, and I'll use this as an example. The virtual event that I did last week, we had 2 video rolls. Right. It was a very, very short. It was actually a demo show for a client to show them what's possible. It was a very short show, but we had 2 video rolls. And I was calling the show, and every time I would get ready to call it, standby video this, coming from here, this source, video, preset this, tracking audio. And if it was a live event in a ballroom with an audience, I would follow that by saying, and lights to video look. Right. And every time I called that cue, I would say, standby video, coming here, preset this, tracking audio, and bite my tongue. So I wouldn't say, and lights to video,
muscle memory.
Because the lights are not going to change. In fact, we got set up, the lights turned on in the studio, and they were on for the rest of the day while we did rehearsals and then did the show and everything else. I think we shut them off when we went to launch to save power. But, it's like that cue now is non-existent. And there are other things like that in terms of how you're calling cues and the cues that the technicians are doing that are so different. And another one that came up was we had this opening video, which then tracked to a voiceover to introduce our speaker. And I was explaining to the audio guy and the video guy, I said in TV, because I had to call the VO cue, and on TV, normally I would give a count in to, and there'd be a floor manager counting in our talent. But because the audio guy was actually playing the file, the voiceover file, there was no count in. And in TV, the voiceover would have been married to the end of the video with the music and all that other stuff. Yep. And I would get a countdown from my playback op, which I would then relay to my floor manager, who would count in the person. And you're on in 5, 4, 3.
Yep, the last two are
silent.
silent.
And they point to you, or in a lot of a multi-camera show, they'll actually point to the camera that you're coming up on, yep. And that camera goes live.
Right.
And that's something that we don't do.
We don't play to
very often on a live event.
Right, and coming from like I've done news, and I've also done morning talk shows and sitcom stuff. It's you're right. It's a completely different setup. And you like the count-ins, those are like, we live and die by those with the countings, and the news and morning shows, it's basically broadcast television to where everything we're seeing in a live events is all being done on comms,
yep.
Right? It's all the playback's all being played by a guy in the back who's got, his comms on, and that's how we're rolling it. We don't, the ASM will shove the guy out or the lady out, whoever it is, and we've been prescripted, all these other things. We have prompters, but not in the same way. So there's a lot of things that cross over, but now we're starting to have to grab and be like, oh, they used to do that. Now we're doing that, right? The comms is one thing that we, communication systems of communicating people outside. But anyway, we'll talk about that in just a second, but just things to think about as we're shifting this live venue to the virtual world.
Yeah, and we're still using the same tools.
Absolutely.
In some ways, but some ways we're either using new tools or repurposing old tools, which is actually kind of the next subject, which is the new technology bit of, obviously there have already some new technologies that have come out. Some of the manufacturers I know also were gracious enough to actually, make their technology free for a period of time.
That was a very positive thing at the beginning of this. Yeah.
Extending your trial time, or just handing out. I know in particular, like Pro Tools. I was working with a guy doing some audio mixing and stuff. And Pro Tools, what they did was they gave out free dongles to the engineers that were working at home that couldn't go into the studio.
Sure.
I know Adobe did some stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
with Creative Cloud.
And anybody we mention here, it's not limited to. We're not trying to it's just the people that we remember, that I remember specifically. Like,
we're not picking out specific manufacturers or companies out there because they were saying they're better than others.
Like from a personal experience, I know Rentex has done. They started doing webinars, which is great. You had Readle Systems doing that. Disguise Systems giving you access to their director dongle so you could do streaming, that kind of stuff, or start working on their workflows. A lot of live training, a lot of live training and on-demand training opened up for free, which is, I think that's something very positive, and it's indicative of our industry of how we want to help each other always, and everybody realizes, hey man, we got completely taken by surprise here, and we've lost our revenue. So here you are, we're helping you get better for the next thing. And I've seen a lot of things where people are like, when we come out of this, hopefully you've taken the time to either learn a new skill or get way better at what you're doing. And so, just wanted to say that bit to thank you for all the companies that have done that.
Oh yeah,
because
absolutely.
It really has helped everybody. Somebody who maybe wasn't so polished on something to be able to get better at that. And I think overall that's gonna create a better workforce when we come back. Of people who will be, more knowledgeable in what's going on. Barco has done a great job in keeping their technology up, their E2 system up. I'm not supposed to say that, but E2. Yeah. I like Barco. Anyway, Vista Systems that, Spider.
I'm just going to say the lighting side of me is so glad they don't own high end anymore.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, fair enough.
High end was purchased by a video company for a while, and we're like, wait, what?
Right.
Well, now they're owned by ETC, an actual lighting company.
Right. But we got the Hog 4 format from that, because the E2 console is the Hog 4.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Anyway,
we'll go with that.
I wanted to touch up on Vista Systems and Spider. They actually did live webinars and all that sort of stuff. Again, as these are just shout outs personally of things that I do, but I'm sure there's way other, on the MA side, there's been tons of stuff. On the lighting side, everybody's offered these things.
And also, I mean, just, audio wise as well. I mean, there's just been a lot of support from the manufacturers in our industry of saying, hey, we all know that, because, I mean, bottom line, our industry shut down before the lockdowns happened.
Yep.
I got home from my last gig February 28th.
Right.
Lockdown didn't happen in Texas. We're based in Texas right now. Lockdown didn't happen in my state until in my county until March 23rd.
Right.
I think Dallas locked down on the 16th, the week before. I got back on the 28th, and my March was full.
Right.
My April was full, and in the course of a couple of weeks, all the dominoes
and
just
it started
fell.
happening during shows.
And
Remember we talked about it? It's like, hey, that one's canceled. That one's canceled. That one's canceled.
We were in Arizona doing a show in the end of February, and that was when all the dominoes started falling. And it was still 2 weeks after those dominoes started to fall before they started doing some of these lockdowns in certain states.
Sure.
I think California was one of the first to do it. Washington State, and then New York, and then it just kind of spread across the country.
Right.
And you're talking about 2 weeks prior to that, our world ended.
Yeah,
and
it was just as busy of a year as any,
and busier in some respect.
Yep.
I mean, so there are lots of good stuff that was going, that was coming up. But then you also look back, and I posted a meme early on actually that. It said government gathering. No gatherings of 10 or more people. I'm like that's just the crew.
That's just
on a live. I mean, that's actually in some cases that's like 1/3 of the crew,
right,
or 1/6 of the crew. Depending on the show you're doing. And then I posted a picture of I'm forgetting his name, but the character Bean, the guy from England.
Mr. Bean?
Mr. Bean, yeah, I can't remember the actor's name. But anyway.
Rowan Atkinson.
Rowan Atkinson as Mr. Bean, and he's just waiting on the side of the road, and above that I said, roadies, and he's just waiting, and he's standing, and then he's lying in a field, and then it's just, it's like, when is it going to come back?
Right.
And the thing is, a lot of industries have come back in a different way, in a different form. A lot of people are working from home, and still doing their jobs. Our industry, our business is all about not being at home, and we have to be on site somewhere to do a live event.
Well, and I wanted to add to that, like, this is something that really hit me hard. I'm used to being out. I'm used to when we talk about somebody that works on a 9 to 5 and they go, man, that was a really tough week. It was a 60-hour week. And you and I would laugh at each other. Anybody in a crew would be like, 60 hours, that's it?
That's like half a week.
Yeah, it's like half a week.
That's a couple of days.
3 or 4 days. Maybe, but anyway, I forgot to say that last week. Is it's like 40 hours, that's like 3 days, if sometimes it can be.
So, and most of us as freelance independent contractors, a lot of us, our normal day is 10 hours. I mean, that's the standard day is 10 hours. And I remember going up in an elevator one time after like a 14-hour day, 14, 15 hours or whatever. And there were these two ladies in the back, and they were talking about, something about the office. And the one lady turned and was like, my boss, oh my gosh, he was so, he made me stay an extra hour for the last 3 days. I had to work 9 hours for the last 3 days, every day.
Right.
He kept me an hour late. And I'm like, and your 9 hours probably included a 1 hour lunch break.
Right. Yeah.
So, okay, I just finished working 14 hours without a lunch break. I mean, we got food, but it was a working lunch.
Right, the working lunch.
So we worked 14 hours, and I was thinking that wasn't too bad of a day. It was, and we actually joke around at times. People talk about, you see somebody leaving the ballroom, after 12 hours, working half days.
That's right.
And it's kind of a joke in the industry. And we touched a little bit on that last week. And we do have that contest going on, by the way, of for the technicians out there, for the road guys and gals that are, that are listening to the podcast. We're doing a contest where, we haven't figured out how we're doing it on the website yet, but we will soon, of writing in and telling us what your longest day was. And we're going to set a deadline. And then whenever we pick our winner, that person will get some invisible merch, either a coffee mug or a T-shirt
or swag,
or swag, as we call it in the industry. Exactly. But to that point of, being used to being on the road all the time, and used to working crazy long hours in a ballroom even most of my quote, local shows nowadays, they get me a hotel room.
Right.
Because we know we're going to be there for many, many hours, and it's, I live about 35, 40 minutes south of Dallas, and don't dox me. And, so, even if I'm doing a show in downtown Dallas, they'll oftentimes get me a hotel room, because we know what the hours are going to be.
Exactly.
That's our industry.
Yep.
And so
In Vegas.
all the people talking about working from home now and companies that have brought their workforce, some people that they had to furlough or lay off, that they've brought them back to work, but they're working from home.
Right.
We can't do that in our industry.
Yep.
You know, I mean, now virtual events are picking up and we're getting more of them. I'm starting to get some calls I've got a gig coming up this coming week. And so that's starting to happen more, which is kind of why we're talking about them and trying to get across the idea of, how do we do this? How do we get better at this? How do we, and what are the tools that are available? So, well, those are all good questions, and we'll start diving into the answers next week in part 2. Until then, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share with your network. We really appreciate it. Thanks, gang. Invisible ones disappearing back behind the curtain till next time in 3,